Morning, John. John is in D-Malay with me. He's one of our advisors. Hello, John. Wait for him to figure it out. So we have, I know you guys don't have the youth groups over there, but you familiar with like D-Malay?
Yeah, I know who they are, yeah.
Howdy, we missed you.
Hey, figured it out.
All right.
Missed me. Yeah.
Yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Charlotte.
Okay.
Today I'm in Annapolis. I'm going to the Naval Academy game, so
Cool.
I'm going to stay muted because it's kind of windy out here.
Yeah, it looks pretty windy out there. It's pretty warm. So we have Gordon. We have this thing. It's the Chevalier degree is an honorary degree for DMLAs. It's like you have to be an active member to earn it, and we have part of our obligation is we have to break bread with a fellow Chevalier or quarter Chevaliers honor about the birthday of Frank Land, who was the founder of DMLA. So November 8th. So anytime around November 8th, we have to have a dinner. So we have a dinner to make it easy for guys to fulfill the obligation. If you can't make it, you can meet up with just a DMLA or a young man in his teens. But we're expected to do that every year. But it's like a little mini reunion because I see guys who got their Chevaliers, 10 years, 20 years before me coming out, and it's kind of neat to connect to guys. So I've been in charge of that if you've seen it on Facebook, I have a picture with all the little cords. That was us. Morning, Michael.
Morning. How are you today?
Good. Stepping down out of your castle to join us. You just need a cloak. With that in the background, you need to be wearing a cloak.
I have chartered the ship to take us to England. We will be leaving in the morning.
Good morning. Absolutely. So yeah, it's kind of neat, Gordon, because it's like all the stuff I do that's Masonic related, but Chevalier is specifically a DMLA thing. But of course, half of us are Masons. Most of us went on to be advisors for the youth, and that's what really makes it work. Is when the older guys stick around. Same with the girls groups. The girls graduate and they stick around as advisors. It helps.
Job's Daughters or something.
Yeah, Job's Daughters and Rainbow were the two girls groups we have. There's some smaller ones out there, but I don't even bother keeping up with them. There's like Daughters of the Nile or something. There's some tiny little ones that we never hear from. So these three are statewide. So, but I don't understand why England just doesn't get behind that. It just seems like a good thing.
I think because we've got our uniform cadet forces and the scouts and the girl guide movements and the church boys brigade, girls brigade. They've always been at the core.
Right. So there's something similar. Yeah. But it's kind of neat. Like I said, it's like a little reunion, and it's like I'm interacting on a different level, but because we're DMLAs. But it's like I said, it's really neat to talk to guys who, they were in DMLA around the time I was born, and that got longer and longer ago. But it's really kind of cool that they're still around. So that's a good time, and it's not a lot of work to maintain, but it was. The main trouble with, it's like I just call a restaurant and say I need a room for 20 people, and then I just email people and keep tabs so I know how many are showing up. It's not a lot of work, but I enjoy doing it because it helps make it easier for people to get out there. It's kind of cool. Morning, Kurt.
Morning, Brother Chris. You're the right time today.
Yes. Good. Yes. I know. We don't even have. Well, we did have daylight savings time, didn't we, last Saturday? So we're all in sync again. And England started. What, you guys were 2 weeks earlier than us, right, Gordon? I think you guys shifted daylight savings time
the end of October.
Right. So
it's 3:05 for me here just now, and where I am up north of Edinburgh, right. By 4:30, 4:45, we'll be dark.
Right. John, are you saying Frank Land died on November 8th? I thought his birthday was November 8th. Have I been wrong all this time?
He died.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, so he died on November 8th. That's why
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, he and Lewis Lauer both died that day.
Really?
Same year.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I've always been I've been spreading the true you're wrong then. Okay, so it was the anniversary of his death. Because I thought that, well, I don't know. Just going on about that. Anyway, so I guess we're coming up at the end of the year. We have one more. I'm going to mention at the end of the meeting, but we have one more unstated the end of this month with Matt Parker, and then that's it. Honestly, I think I had like 18 or 20, well, at least 18 or 20 unstateds this year, and it's been a lot. I mean, it's really. When I set out, I'm like, well, I'll just book one every Saturday. We don't have something else going on, and it's just setting them up was like get it all done one weekend. The hard part is booking people, really. And like in years past, it's like, okay, we're in October or we're in November, so I'm running out of people, so I need to go book November, December, January. I'll try to book like 3 months out, and then I coast. And then it's like January, it's like, oh crap, I only got one more meeting. I need to line up more speakers. So this year I was smart, and in December I spent a weekend and like, let me book all you guys for the whole year, get you all locked in, and it's only on my list. No one else knows besides you and me. I'm the only one who has the whole schedule. If I have to swap you out with someone, no one knows unless I tell them. So it's like, it's no big deal as long as I have somebody who's flexible. Like, okay, Gordon can't make it. Can you fill in?
Yeah.
But, and then it's just hosting them. But it seems just like hosting them and then getting the YouTube edited for the YouTube and all. Oh, and John dropped. I guess he had some connection issues. So I'm starting to feel it because I've had a lot of weekends where it's like, I had the Scottish Rite reunion, or the Scottish Rite conference, and came back and then had a Zoom and then had something else. And it seems like every weekend I've got something going on. So I'm thinking next year I might just do one a month and leave it at that. And if I feel up to it, I'll throw in an extra one. But I don't think I can keep this pace next year of 2 a month. It's a lot. We started doing one a month in COVID day, one a week during COVID. I think we went like 4 months. I had one every Saturday.
That's what we did, Chris. It was, I think, 80 weeks on the trot every week to find a speaker. It was really, really hard going. Yeah,
I remember you showed me that list once. I was like, geez, But now, did you have several people in your? Was this your lodge doing it or research lodge?
A research lodge. So
okay, how many people were involved in making that happen? Just you. Okay, see, you're like me. You're an idiot, basically, is the technical term. Let me make this happen. I don't know. I think if I leaned on Michael, he might be able to help me out, but I don't know. But it's one of those things. Like it's not hard to do. I mean, actually doing it isn't hard. I mean, me sitting here running my mouth for an hour, believe it or not, that's not hard. But it's the pace, and it's when something comes up, as stuff inevitably does, and I can't make it. I was sick one time, I was out of town another time, and it's like, if I can't physically be present to do it, we don't happen. And that's what worries me, is I don't want to be we call it the single point of failure in the military. It's, if I can't be there, it don't go on. And that's not a good position. I mean, if we didn't have these, it wouldn't be the end of the world. We'd all survive. Some of us would miss the Zoom meetings, but it's not life. It's not a threat to life, but I mean, I enjoy having them and I'm glad we are able to, but it just still, I want to keep having them. And I'm concerned that if I can't be here, we can't have it. And I'm trying to make it more, if there was multiple people involved and I didn't have to worry about being at every single one of them, we'd probably do them more regularly, but I don't know. Morning, Alan. Wait, Alan's not driving? You're not driving? You're always driving. And now he's frozen. Okay, that was Alan. Maybe he'll unfreeze it. Alan's a truck. Are you there?
Yes, I'm unmuted, but
okay.
That doesn't hear me.
Well, it's just weird that you're not driving. I mean, you're in a car, but you're not driving. I didn't think that was possible.
I'm sitting still, waiting to get enlightened.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good then. Yeah, Alan's a truck driver, so he's always in his truck. And you're in your car now. I see windows, so you must be in a car or a truck. Anyway, I actually got to meet Alan in person. It was kind of unusual. Like, oh wow, real life in the face, in the flesh. Anyway, all right. So I've done enough rambling, and it's 10 after 10. So I think I've successfully spent enough time. We got about 6 of us, but we're going to go with that, Gordon.
Yeah, no worries.
I think everybody here is on the list, but I'll do my formalities anyway. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Virginia Research Lodge for our February 16th unstated meeting here on Zoom. My name is Chris Douglas, Senior Warden of Virginia Research Lodge. I think everybody here is already in the groups, but there's all the links to the Facebook page and the website and our new YouTube channel. And then my email if you're not on the mailing list, but I think everybody here already is. So good to see everybody here. We've wasted a lot of time talking about nothing the last 20 minutes, so it's been fun. I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to Brother Gordon Michie, are you going to be giving a presentation? Do you need to share?
Yeah, please, if I can share. I've got some slides to share with you.
Excellent. Let me that so you can do that. All right, go ahead and take it away, Gordon.
Okay, let's see if that works. And what can you see, Brown? A white screen.
I can see it. Brother Field Marshal Haig, I see it.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, Chris, thank you very much for inviting me back to the Virginia Lodge of Research. It's been a good 18 months since we've spoken over the Zoom, but we used to regularly speak, and I used to attend your unstated meetings. But post-COVID, I've got back to normal Freemasonry, where we're meeting people in the flesh, so it's good. And I've pulled together this relatively new presentation. This is the first time it's been shown in public, and it's about Brother Field Marshal Douglas Haig, Knight of the Thistle, First Earl Haig. And I've entitled it The Soldier's Friend and the Lost Apprentice. And hopefully the reason for that will become known in the next half hour. So who am I? Why me? I served in Her Majesty's Royal Air Force in the late 80s. I was a Cold War warrior. I was a good boy for a while, so they gave me a wee flight in that tornado as a thank you. I was initiated into Lodge Earl Haig, so there's the first connection for you, Brown, in 1989, and I've had the privilege of being the master over 2 periods, and the second period was to follow my father's footsteps, who was our 50th anniversary master, and if it wasn't for COVID, I would have been the 100th anniversary master, but technically I was, because the commemorations I was put back into the chair for. And I'm a past substitute provincial Grand Master of my province here in Scotland, and that's like your district deputies. I think it's the posted equivalent that you've got over in Virginia. And I'm a past master of the local research lodge. And I think for this presentation, I'm also a friend of Earl Haig's granddaughter, Raina, and I was actually at a dinner with her in London last Wednesday, sitting next to her, and I'll talk about her in a little bit. So I want to start with the Field Marshal's favourite quote: "Question not but live and labour till the goal is won, helping every feeble neighbour, seeking help from none. Life is mostly froth and bubbles, 2 things stand like stone, kindness in another's trouble, courage in your own." And that was a quote from Adam Lindsay Gordon around the 1880s, I think it was. But when you read those words, you can see the Masonic connections with it. And as we introduce more of Haig and his Masonic connections, I think you'll see more of the man. I come from a little town in the Kingdom of Fife called Markinch, and you'll see on that red brick building it says John Haig and Company Limited, Markinch, because Markinch was known around the world as the home of Haig's, and you'll see that Haig's Gold Label bottle was one of the most popular bottles of whiskies sold in the States for many, many years. And the whiskey empire, the Haig's whiskey empire, actually goes back to Robert Haig in the 1600s, probably before your nation was formed. The first Haig distillery was around. And if you follow that down to the sort of the 1750s, there's always a debate over what's the oldest whiskey. Is it proper whiskey without the E, or is it whiskey with the E, that Irish variety? But when you actually look at the Haig family tree, it was the Haigs that invented the Irish whiskey as well. Margaret, to manage the Steenholm Bow Street Brewery, which then became Jameson's, and William, her brother, took over the Scottish whiskey, the Haigs side of it. So two sides of the same coin is Haigs and Jameson's. There's the current family tree for the Field Marshal, and the third Earl is currently, he lives here in Fife, he farms here in Fife, and the family home I'll introduce to you in a minute or two. And Lady Jane is a lovely woman, and she's a current countess, and she comes to a lot of the work events that I go to. Another name that you'll recognise being Americans is Lord Astor, because the Haigs married into the Astor family, where a lot of the wealth came from back in the day. And we've still got John Astor, the current Lord Astor, quite a well-known philanthropist in the UK, and very, very well connected. But if you go down, you can see Sarah and George Lopez, and they've got a son, Harry, married to Laura Parker Bowles. Now, I'm not sure if you recognise the connection with the Parker Bowles, but that's now our Queen's granddaughter, Queen Camilla's granddaughter. So there's quite a lot of royal connections with the Haig family over the days and right up until today. Haig's childhood. Haig was born in Edinburgh in Charlotte Square, and there's a plaque you can see there. But he was actually brought up about 5 miles from where I'm currently sitting, in the village of Windigates at Cameron House, which is now a hospital. And you can see him there with his two brothers, George and John, when they were probably about 4, 3 and 1, and Haig there in his first kilt. His education began as a boarder in St Andrews, and then he moved over to Edinburgh, and ultimately he attended Clifton College. He was quite the sportsman, Brian. He was really into his football. That's soccer, as you guys would recognise it as, and polo and golf. That was his 3 main loves. Clifton College, which became his alma mater, always had a very close connection with Haig right up until he passed away. And I found this photograph when I was researching him of the War Memorial at Clifton College being opened and dedicated by Haig. When he went to Oxford, he studied for his degree, but he wasn't the greatest of students. He wasn't the greatest of scholars, and he was sort of falling behind. And he was probably getting himself involved in other things, such as the Bullingdon Club, which was probably, if you look at your Skull and Bones Club in your Ivy Leagues, this is the Bullingdon Club's the Oxford and Cambridge equivalent. If you look at some other famous members, Edward VIII, Cecil Rhodes, Churchill, Rothschild, more modern contemporaries, Cameron and Johnson, all part of it. But he didn't get his degree because if he had to resit a year, he would have been too old to get into Sandhurst Military Academy, and he knew he wanted to be a soldier. So he forgave the education. He was commissioned into the 7th Queen's Own Hussars in 1885. And the Queen's Own Hussars was a British Army regiment that was formed in 1689. So it had quite a long pedigree, a long lineage, and it was finally amalgamated into its current form at the Queen's Own Hussars in 1958. And just a quick overlook of Haig's army career before we get to the First World War, where he made his name. He saw service out in India. He was very early on appointed as regiment's adjutant. Staff College at Kimberley in 1896. Kitchener, another Freemason, and we'll talk about him in a minute or two. He was on his staff in the Mahdist War in Sudan in 1898. And the First Boer War down in South Africa. He became the Deputy Assistant Adjutant General of the Cavalry Division. It's important to remember that Haig was a cavalryman. And he was under Bob Roberts' command, and Bob Roberts went on to be a Field Marshal, but also he's quite a well-renowned Freemason as well. After the war, he got to command his own regiment, the 17th Lancers. And when you look at his gravestone, you see the cap badge of the 17th Lancers, which is very Masonic in connection as well, Bren, because it's a skull and crossbones, and the motto is death or glory. After the Boer War, he was sent back out to India, out to the colony, and he was appointed Inspector General of the Cavalry. But when you look at his career, having joined as a 23-year-old, he wasn't promoted past the age of captain until he was 37. But he then went on to have a meteoric rise, and he became the youngest Major General in the British Army at the time, from 37 through to 1904. And that a Major General in the UK military is equivalent of a 2-star general. By this time, he'd already become a Mason, and I'll touch on that in a minute or two. But I just wanted to highlight two of his Masonic peers. Lord Kitchener, he was 33 when he was initiated, we believe, in Cairo. He also joined the most senior lodge in Egypt, the Bulwer Lodge. And there's a variety of English lodges associated with his name, and he appeared as a petitioner for the Drury Lane Lodge. Drury Lane is just round the corner from the Great Queen Street, adjoins it, where the Grand Temple of the United Grand Lodge of England is situated. His other peer was Lord Roberts of Kandahar, and Lord Roberts was that sort of boy's hero. He was everyone that you aspired to be during that Victorian period. He was also a very ardent and busy Freemason. So the First World War, Brian. If we look at 1914, and I don't propose to go into a lot of detail about Haig during the First World War, because that is multiple hours in its own, because what I want to try to get to is talk about his Masonic connections with you and a little bit about my thoughts on the man. But as background, he was appointed, by this time he was a general, and he was appointed an aide-de-camp to King George V in February 14. He was at that time in command of the Aldershot garrison. Aldershot is one of the largest military garrisons in the British Army, just south of London. And at the beginning of the war, and he had a lot of dealings with the planning of the formation of what the British Army would look like going into the war. The Aldershot Command was formed into the First Corps.
All right, Gordon, can I interrupt for 1 sec? Okay, so his first name was Douglas, name, Haig.
Yeah.
So when I heard Field Marshal Earl Haig, I assumed Earl was his first name, but he is, and Earl, that's a title.
That's a title in the nobility of Great Britain.
Okay.
I'll talk to you about.
I thought he was born Earl Haig, but he was born Douglas Haig.
No.
Okay, now I understand. Okay,
Yeah.
just want to clarify. Go ahead.
So at that time, the Royal Air Force that I served in hadn't come to fruition. The Royal Air Force was founded on the 1st of April 1918. Some in the British military still say that it's the biggest April Fool's joke ever, because we're renowned for being 5-star hotel inspectors, because we let our officers go to the front line and we stay back in the NAFI queue. I don't know how much truth in that is or not, but that's all part of the military humour. But he was really interested in the potential of aircraft, the early biplanes and triplanes that were coming about after the Wright brothers. And Major Trenchard, Hugh Trenchard of the Royal Flying Corps, which was at that time still part of the army, he became the founder of the Royal Air Force. And Haig spoke with him, and he organised some photographic air reconnaissance, looking at what the trench lines looked like, looking at what the artillery looked like. As the war was going on, the early part of the war wasn't going very well for Britain. The Germans were pretty much in the ascendancy. They'd overrun Europe. And in December 15, he was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the British Expeditionary Forces. And then he took charge of the Battle of the Somme. And it was the Battle of the Somme that started giving him quite a bad reputation from the politicians, because you have to think of the tactics. Haig was a cavalryman. And it was the first war that they were dealing with machine guns, tanks, aeroplanes. And the tactics that they'd known through the 19th century were not about this modern equipment, this modern tech. So they were having to learn on the hoof, so to speak, excuse the horsey pun, about how to deal with that. 1st of January 1917, he was appointed to Field Marshal, which is the highest military rank in the British military. We currently do not have any active Field Marshals, and you only now get active Field Marshals when the nation's at war. We do have some honorary ones. The Royals tend to be, so King Charles is a Field Marshal. And he was very close to King George V. And there's a handwritten note from the King when he appointed him Field Marshal. I hope you will look upon this as a New Year's gift from myself and the country. And that's one of the telling things about how the country actually viewed Haig. The war was, the politicians were now into 1917, Brian, and the war was beginning to stretch out. There was a bit of stalemate. The politicians were thinking, well, let's just bunker down. Let's wait to spring 19, have the spring offensive, and we can end it. But Haig was against that, and he fought with them, and he went against Marshal Foch, who was the French general, and they launched the 100 days push that ended the war from the 21st of August to the 11th of November, which led to the armistice being signed. And if it wasn't for Haig pushing for that, many more men would have died, not necessarily from a German bullet, but from trench foot, from pneumonia, from malnutrition, because they were still living in that environment. So Haig's got a lot to be thanked for saving many lives. There's so many books, Brian, about Haig in the First World War. One of the ones that I like is this one from Harris. So if you do get your hands on it, it's a very good account of him. When I'm looking at military things, I always like to see who's on the other side, particularly if there's a Masonic connection. And the German Kaiser, the German king at the time, was Kaiser William II. And interestingly, he was the oldest grandchild of our Queen Victoria. So we were actually fighting, our king was fighting his cousin. It was two cousins either side of that great divide. And in 1913, the German Masonic community were abundantly and clearly loyal to Kaiser William II. And there was an anniversary festival from the Freemasons to mark the 25th anniversary of his reign. And the words there, the celebration of this festival fills our hearts with thanks that we live in peace, feeling assured that wise counsel guides our destiny and leads us to enjoy happiness and contentment and permits full enjoyment of our pleasures. But Brian, something must have happened to the Kaiser. Because when we got to 1914 to 1918, he was very anti-English, he was very anti-Semitic, he was very anti-Freemasonry in his views. And just before the Second World War, this is some of the things he was saying about the UK, about England, about English nobility. And he came from English nobility, Brian. He's talking about his grandmother here. And that how we as British people must be liberated from the Antichrist and everything. We must drive Judah out of England, just as he's been driven out of the continent by Hitler. So it was really amazing to see the differences. I've got a little visitor coming in here, Brian. My 3-year-old granddaughter's just appeared. Well, she's 2 today, and she's 3 tomorrow. Say hello. Hello.
Hello there.
Well, and these men are from America. Stop picking your beak. But again, when you look at his father was a Freemason, and he was a very active Freemason. So what happened to Kaiser Wilhelm to turn him against the Masonic community? Something that I'm continuing to research with some German Freemasons that I know. The other famous German from the First War was Admiral von Tirpitz, and he was a German Grand Admiral. And again, he was a Freemason, Graham. He was a member of Lodge zur Aufrichten Herzen in Frankfurt. So you can see on both sides of the divide, and I think you see that from your Civil War, the North and South, there was Freemasons on either side. And what brought Freemasons to be on either side, who knows? But Haig was being vilified. He was being vilified by the Prime Minister, and it was all over political ego. And the relationship between Haig and Lloyd George, it was one of those great psychodramas of the First World War. The Welshman who came from the pits and the man of privilege with the whiskey money, they detested each other. And Lloyd George, in his memoirs, wrote about Haig. He was intellectually and temperamentally unequal to the command of an army of millions fighting battles on fields, a second-rate commander in unparalleled and unforeseen circumstances. So he hated Haig. He really did, and that's what led to his memoirs of slating Haig for pretty much 70 out of the last 100 years about lions, our men, our troops, being led by donkeys, and Haig being the donkey. But Haig's men lauded him. They loved him. They thought he was a great leader. And in the aftermath of the war, Haig refused Lloyd George's offers of a viscountcy. And Chris, this is where you come into the aristocracy of the UK. So at the top, you've got the Marquises and the Dukes and the Earls and the Viscounts and everything. But he was then made an Earl, and he was gifted his family house of Beamerside. And the Haigs had been at Beamerside on the banks of the Tweed forever and a day. And Thomas the Rhymer wrote, there will always be a Haig at Beamerside, tide what may. And tide what may became the motto of the family. There's a clipping here from the Scotsman on Friday, February the 3rd, 1928. The matter is closely examined in that valuable border family history, the Haigs of Beamerside. And it goes back, the lineage goes back to Petrus de Haga, 1215 to 1220. So you can see how far back in history they go, that border and Fife family. And when you're looking at them and you look at other great Scottish men, Sir Walter Scott, he put beautiful lines about William Pitt's death, and he said they apply at Haig's death the same. The trumpet's silver voice is still, the warder silent on the hill. So Haig was lauded by everyone. This is Beamerside. I was actually down there about 2 months ago, and the middle window, I don't know if you can see my arrow here, that was Haig's study, and I had a business meeting in there with our Wi-Fi, because it's now a glorified Airbnb brand. So if you want to bring your family over, it can take about 25 guests, and the housekeeper makes fantastic scones, homemade scones, and the tea, and you can get a choice of Earl Grey or breakfast tea. After the war, Haig was really famed for founding the British Legion movement, that movement that still exists today, who I work for, to look after our soldiers, sailors, airmen. in time of need, in time of distress. He also founded Haig Homes, and Haig Homes were founded in his memory in 1929. They were founded by the Prince of Wales, who later became King Edward VIII. And he'd served under Haig during the war, and he felt that that would be a fitting tribute to him instead of having another statue. And Haig Homes still house hundreds of British veterans, disabled veterans today. So that testimony is still there, that memory of Haig. And there you can see Edward in uniform during the war. He joined the Grenadier Guards. He worked with Kitchener, another Freemason, and then he became a Freemason himself. He was actually quite brave because he was awarded the Military Cross. And that's probably the second highest gallantry medal in the UK after the Victoria Cross. After the war, again, looking at the organisations that lauded him, the Royal and Ancient Golf Club, he became captain 1920 to 21. And if this works, Brian, you'll see him after his Garmin advert disappears in a second. You'll see him taking the tee shot, the captain's tee shot, first shot off the first tee outside the Royal and Ancient Clubhouse in St Andrews. And I was there for the Ladies Open about 2 months ago, and that view is exactly the same as it is today, Brian. We just see, because as I said earlier, polo, soccer and golf are his three main loves. And there's a sailor firing the cannon, and Haig takes the first tee. And look at the crowd behind him, lauding him. And the boys run, they pour out the scramble to get that first ball. St Andrews University made him Chancellor in 1922 to 1928. But Haig the Freemason, Brian, he was initiated into Elgin's Lodge at Leven number 91 in December 1881. Now, I want you to look at these dates closely, Brian. He was passed February 24. 30 odd years later, and raised in March 24. He became Master of the Lodge in 1925 to 26, a year later. He became an honorary member of Canongate Kilwinning number 2, Grand Senior Deacon in the Grand Lodge of Scotland, and a Senior Grand Deacon in the United Grand Lodge of England. Lord Elgin, who was 100 this year, he wrote and he spoke to me recently about his father's memories of Lord Haig. And he came to visit Broom Hall, which is Elgin's residence, to visit a club of ex-servicemen in Dunfermline. I was at a Masonic meeting this morning in Dunfermline, Brian, and he was setting up the British Legion. And we got talking round the dinner table, and Elgin asked Haig if he'd ever joined the Freemasons, and it turned out that he had. He joined before he went to, when he was an undergraduate at Oxford. But he never went back because he was busy being a soldier fighting all around the world. But they got him back to the lodge, and he took his second and third degrees. This is Lord Elgin, along with myself, in the French consulate 5 years ago at the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings. Lord Elgin, past Grand Master Mason of Scotland, and one of the world's most famous Freemasons, I would suggest. He said to me that day he shouldn't have been at the D-Day commemorations because he was a D-Day +2 veteran, and D-Day +4, he was blown up in his tank. He was a Scots Guards tanky, and he still receives a war pension to this day as a 100-year-old. 1954, Earl Haig was raised to the 3rd degree. It was such a big thing, Brian, that Scotland's best-selling, best-known paper, The Scotsman, wrote about it. It was over. Bye-bye, darling. Okay, you enjoy. Okay, right, darling. Bye-bye. Shut the door. Sorry, Brian. So it was over 40 years since he had his early degrees. But that evening, there was a huge banquet. The Imperial Services were toasted by Hugh Biddle Middleton, who became Deputy Provincial Grand Master of my province. And this is the Past Masters Board in the lodge, and you can see the complimentary banquet. You can see the photographs in the Caledonian Hotel that's still there. And one of the things that's really poignant for me, Brian, is my lodge now meets in Elgin's Lodge at Leven. But when he was in the chair, he put through 19 candidates, and the journal is still on the Masters Dais to this day, Brian, and you can see their names, the 19 of them. So he wasn't an absentee landlord. My mother lodge meet there, and his cavalry, we have in our possession his cavalry sword. And you can see the clipping from the press. He gifted it to us, and he asked us to ensure that we would always be a lodge of remembrance, a lodge that was there to ensure that the memory of those men who gave the ultimate sacrifice never left. And Wednesday past, I led a service of dedication and remembrance, as we do every year. And you can see him carrying the cavalry sword there that we have in the lodge. So he took office in Grand Lodge, and the last time he was present was on the 4th of May 1927. And I believe he would have went on to become the Grand Master Mason of Scotland if he'd lived past his death in 1928. Scottish Freemasonry, he was admitted a member of Lodge Canongate Kilwinning. Again, a huge write-up about that honorary membership. And I will share the slides with Chris so you can read these articles in more depth. And again, you can see Lord Elgin there. He was proposing the toast to him. And 3 weeks ago, Brian, I had the honour of doing a presentation on remembrance in Freemasonry in number 2. And they gifted to me the programme that was there when Haig was made honorary member, and it's got Haig's signature on it, which is now proudly in my collection. He was also made an honorary member of the Trace House Lodge of Glasgow, which was one of them, and you can see his signature there in the tile just to the left. The statue of Haig sits within the castle, and that's the immediate past governor of the castle, who's also a Freemason, Sir Alistair Bruce of Creanach, a direct descendant of Robert the Bruce and a cousin of the Earl of Elgin. I'm not really going to go into depth about his wife, Lady Dorothy, in this presentation, Brian, but just to say she was also a Freemason. She was a member of Lodge Mercury number 11, which was consecrated as a travelling lodge, and they were the first lodge to bring female Freemasonry to Scotland. His last speech was 2 days before he passed away, and it was to Boy Scouts on citizenship. And you can see him there with Baden Powell, who founded the Boy Scouts movement. He died suddenly at Price's Gate, London, from a heart attack. And the gun carriage that carried the unknown warrior carried Haig's body from St Columba's Church, which was a Scottish church in London, where he lay in state, to Westminster Abbey. He was then taken by train to St Giles in Edinburgh, where he laid in state, and then he was buried at Driver Abbey, Melrose. And when he died, there was a day of national mourning. And not within living memory had the nation accorded to any of its sons such a demonstration of loyalty, fidelity and affection, one commentator wrote. And it was reported that 1 million people lined the streets of London. So you can't tell me that they didn't love and laud him if so many people came out. And there's just some photographs again, his death mask, the gun carriages, and his grave at Driver Abbey. And this should just show after the Garmin advert, just a quick clip from London paying homage as he was born to Westminster Abbey for the memorial service. Sir Walter Scott, who is buried next to Freemason, no bolder a man as Earl Haig, and you can see the princes of the realm there, and the field marshals and the household division accompanying him. You can see the crowds there and his men and the jocks following the gun carriage. He's buried alongside his wife, Dorothy, under a standard Commonwealth grave commission headstone. His mother and father are buried in the cemetery here in Markinch, where I live. And it's a very wealthy, ostentatious grave because they had the whiskey money. But he wanted to be buried under an Imperial war grave. The tributes to soldier Lord Blythe, who was the Grand Master Mason at the time, writing in the Scotsman, paid great testament to Haig, the family. He was indeed beloved by all ranks who served under him. Today we think of Douglas Haig as we knew him in Grand Lodge, a man of delightful personality, wonderful charm of manner. He endeared himself to all with whom he came in contact. Edinburgh News, members of Canongate Kilwinning, mourning him. The Chase House Lodge of Glasgow were presented this salver, the alms dish inscribed in his memory by Lady Haig. And even recently, during the centenary of the armistice, Scottish Freemasons toured around the 32 Scottish provinces, and one of the places we went was to his graveside, and we laid wreaths. But I'll leave the final words of this presentation to another brother, Brother Winston Churchill. If there are some who would question Haig's right to rank with Wellington in British military annals, there are none who will deny that his character and his conduct as a soldier will long serve as an example to us all. That was Winston Churchill on Haig 10 years after his death. Some acknowledgements, Brian. And I'll stop sharing. Then that's my quick insight into Haig, the man, the soldier, and the Freemason. That I hope's whetted your appetite to delve more into his background and history.
Thank you, Gordon. I really appreciate that. So, just for background, how long does it typically take between being initiated, passed, and raised in Scotland?
8 weeks.
Okay. All right. Do you have a catechism? Do you have to learn ritual? Yeah. Okay. But is there a mandatory, like you have to wait between each one?
14 days between degrees is mandatory. So generally what happens, more and more lodges are trying to delay that, so you've maybe got a month between it, or more lodges are going to meeting once a month instead of twice a month. Other more forward-thinking lodges are maybe delaying it 6 months and getting them out and doing other stuff. But in the main, it's every fortnight.
Well, in his case, though, it was simply he went off and was overseas and doing everything. Well, so, not to be nitpicky, but did he do much as a Mason in the time between 1881 and 1924 when he actually got a second degree? Okay. He was technically a Mason. Well, what's interesting now, I guess, everything, I'm sure in his case they made an exception. Here in Virginia, for example, you have a year, you have 6 months to give your EA catechism. And then you just write a letter to the secretary and we do a voice vote to give you another 6 months. I've coached a lot of brothers along the way. And then after a year, you can again write a letter to get an extension. But you have to, basically, if you don't put in a letter or anything else, we just basically suspend you. And then you're frozen until you come back to us years later and we'd have to vote to let you resume. So I'm sure it's atypical for him, but it's interesting that he was only an active Mason, let's say, from 24 to 28, but he went right in as master next year, and then the Grand Line.
I can raise you that with one of his other peers, the Admiral of Fleet, John Jellicoe, Earl Jellicoe. He was disliked as much as Haig was disliked by Lloyd George, and he was sent to become governor of New Zealand, which was the furthest part of the empire. He was initiated into a lodge in New Zealand, and within 9 months, he was a Grand Master Mason, the Grand Lodge of New Zealand. And within that time, initiated, passed, raised, installed into the chair, and Grand Master Mason within 9 months.
Oh my!
Because the men, they were senior men, they were 4 or 5 star generals. They were lauded. They were treated like gods, and so to have them and have that opportunity. But like Haig, Jellicoe got very heavily involved. He consecrated lodges. He initiated brethren when he was master, and he wasn't a figurehead master.
Understood. And brother, I got a few other questions, but any other brother have a comment or a question? I'm sure Michael does.
I always do, of course.
That's why I have you around.
I wanted the first picture of him when he's a youth. He, I guess it's the way he's standing, but he looks like he only has one leg.
Just the way he's standing, Michael.
Just the way he's standing. That was one of the things I thought about.
He did all that with only one leg.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how he stayed on his horse, but he just.
As long as you've got two cheeks, you can stay on your horse.
That's right. The other question was about the Kaiser. Now, you said when he left Dorn, what was Dorn?
That was his home.
Okay.
So he was still in charge when Hitler came to power, and he was still nominally the king of Germany. But he was pushed to the sides, and he was totally ignored because you had the Third Reich.
Okay, I mean, this is,
and he was looked as the sad, bad old uncle.
Right.
And I think he saw, and I think this is part of his anti-Masonic, anti-Semitic journey, was to ensure that Hitler kept him alive.
Oh, I see. So, I mean, it shows my limited following of what happened in World War I. So the Kaiser was the head of Germany, and that's who we were at war with in World War I. He lost the war, but stayed as the head of Germany for another 20 years. And then when Hitler was coming to power, that's when he came out with it. Okay. That makes a little more sense. Okay. And the final question was, I saw the name Alexander Haig. You know, we had a Alexander Haig who was, let's see if I got it right. He was, I think, Secretary of Defense, I think, for the, for Nixon or whoever it was.
Yeah.
Was he related to?
He would probably say he was related because I think there's a, without any disrespect to my American brethren, there's always a great desire to trace your family back to Scotland.
Oh, of course. Alexander Haig, I mean, he was well known to me when I was growing up because he was the one when, oh wait, I'm sorry, let me get it right. Now, Alexander Haig was Secretary of Defense under Reagan, and when Reagan was hospitalized when he was shot, Al Haig came out and said, "I'm in charge now."
Yeah,
that's
he was
right.
Secretary of State then.
Secretary of State, that's it. Secretary of State, right. But he had a very long, I mean, obviously he was general, he had a long military career. Yeah, it was Secretary of State, yes. For those who don't know, Secretary of State is not, well, he is somewhere in the line of succession, but Al Haig basically said, you know, to heck with Bush, to heck with the Speaker of the House, you know, he's like, I'm in charge. But that's where I remembered him. Now, I had a chance to work at SACLANT headquarters in Norfolk, which is the NATO military arm. And so we have the NATO headquarters here in Norfolk. And Al Haig was actually SACLANT commander back in the 70s, I guess it was. So I saw the pictures of all the previous SACLANT generals, and I saw Al Haig. I was like, oh, I know that guy. So,
but yeah, no direct family membership.
Yep. No. Okay. I saw the name. I had to ask. Like, oh, Al Haig. Yeah.
Okay. Chris, I wanted to ask too. There was a reference in there to, you know, and I know at one time the British and the Scottish they had lodges in Egypt, but if I understand, all of those are now closed. Am I correct?
Yes. However, I think that some of those Egyptian lodges then became lodges under the United Grand Lodge of England, and their membership transferred, or they set up a new lodge that was similar. So if you look at something like the Lodge of the Silent Cities, which is the Commonwealth War Graves Lodge, it was set up in France under the Grand Lodge of France. But when the headquarters of the Imperial War Graves Commission moved from St. Omer in France back to the UK, they set up a new lodge under the United Grand Lodge of England with the same name, with the same office bearers, and the French one closed down. I think that happened with quite a few of the Egyptian lodges. When the British military left, they closed, and then they opened that group of friends opened their own lodge.
But there are no lodges on Egyptian soil anymore.
Right.
Transferred, but okay. Yep. Yeah, it's always interesting. And you guys know, you may have noticed I'm on social media just a little bit. I'm always having people contacting me about Masonry and guys message me and want to join, and I try to be nice and help them. And inevitably, it seems about half the guys are from some part of Africa that may or may not have a lodge anywhere near them. And I try, and most of the time it is a British provincial Grand Lodge overseeing that country. There's not like a Grand Lodge of Cameroon or whatever that's free and independent. But then the other half are guys in Muslim-run countries that sit like Lebanon, and they do not allow Masonry. And I try to explain to these guys nicely, like,
there is Scottish Masonry in Lebanon.
In Lebanon may be an exception, but I mean that from countries that I go and look for them, and it's like, I'm sorry, but because of your government, Masonry is not allowed. And if you really want to be a Mason, I'm not going to suggest you move, but you literally would have to move to another country if you want to be a Mason. You're out of luck. And they're like, well, can you help me? No, I just explained to you. I can't help you anyway, but other than tell you where to go. But it's like, it's funny how there are several countries that do not allow Masonry. And there are people in there who want to join. So.
Am I correct? There is still a Scottish lodge in Amman, Jordan?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Jordan is one of the
countries. I did have one more question to but this is unrelated to the topic, but we have a regular visitor that comes to Grand Lodge in Virginia named John Jack, and he always visits us down at Mason's Hall. John told me that he has just progressed from senior Grand Deacon to
Jim Jack. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, John was here at Grand Lodge in Virginia this year, and he always likes to visit Mason's Hall, which is my lodge, and come down and give it to us. So if you see John, let him know I said hi.
Mm-hmm. Let me see, because he just put stuff up last week. Because I think
I saw his picture there on Facebook. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
his name is. Yeah, that's the one I saw. That's Pat Murphy next to him. Patrick Murphy from Newport News.
I think.
Yep. Okay, so what is his name again? Because you called him James Jack. Okay.
Yes.
Michael said John Jack.
Oh, James Jack. Yes.
Okay. I was like, you see Jim, John, and Jack at the same time. Well, that's
there he is with the Virginia Masons.
Indeed.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, those are all the grand officers for this year. That's very cool. Any other brothers? Alan, Kurt, John? You guys have any questions for Gordon or comments about the talk?
A totally unrelated question. What is the castle backdrop in Michael's?
You don't recognize it?
No.
Bran Castle in Romania.
Grand Castle in Romania.
BRAN, Bran Castle.
You may recognize the movie it was in. That's what they use for the Dracula movies.
Yeah, I also saw it in Young Frankenstein.
Well, yeah, they used the same castle. Well, it is it's an excellent view with the clouds behind it. It's a very imposing looking castle.
Yeah.
So, very cool. All right. Well, Gordon, I really appreciate it. It's kind of neat that I have brothers who come and talk about various subjects, and there are some guys like Joe March. Well, Joe actually is more like, it's more historical stuff. You'll get into the weeds on here's what the Bible says and here's what actual history says to complement and all that. But you are one of those guys like, if I want a military Masonic tie-in, I can always count on you for having that. That seems to be more your subject, where you're honed in on. And I think that's great. I love the fact that I have you brothers come in and give talks on things. It's the whole spectrum. If you go look at our YouTube channel, and by the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. A couple weeks in the future. But if you look at all of the titles we have over there, I keep meaning to go back and find some way to tie all those together and make some sort of a presentation of it. Because just in doing these things, just what I'm doing here, we have so many different topics we've managed to cover over the last 4 years. It's amazing. And we go into so many seemingly unrelated areas, but there's always some sort of Masonic tie that brings them all together. But, I love the way that you have this area that you're covering for us. It's, that you offer us. It's like there's a joke. There's a TV show here, Law and Order SVU, and one of the guys, Finn's like, "Well, we'll go talk to my rope guy," and he says, "You have a rope guy?"
We get iced tea here as well.
Yeah. See, so
I go to sleep watching it every night.
Well, but he has a rope guy. So he has some guy who works at the FBI who's like an expert on all sorts of ropes. So it's like, well, of course I got a rope guy. Well, so I've got a British military guy here, and I appreciate it. It's kind of neat that I've got these friendships where I've got people that it's more niche, but it's always interesting because it's not typically covered. I mean, we don't have a lot of military coverage anyway. And I love the fact that so many of you, British and Scottish brothers, who participate in this thing and have over the years. You guys are as big an influence as the Virginia Masons are, or if not more. You guys have been regulars over the years. And I'm sorry, COVID's over, so people are going back to their regular lives. We're not doing as many of these. We don't have as much attendance as we once did. We had at least 20, 30 people at every one of these, and that was great. I don't know if we'll get back up there again. But, as long as we're still meeting, as long as people are interested, I'm going to keep hosting these. But it's really kind of neat to be driving this whole thing and just see all of the variety of topics we've managed to cover over the years. And this is more, I guess you would say, more of a traditional research lodge topic. It's history, it ties into masonry, and it's all well and good. And then we got the real esoteric stuff where the guy comes in and talks about alchemy, and we have a guy that comes in and talks about Kabbalah. And we're managing to cover all of these topics on all these different far-flung things, but they all tie back to masonry. So if you go watch all of them, it's like we've got. I should offer this as a bachelor's course in esoterica. I mean, we have so many things that I've just spun together by inviting people to come and talk. It's so cool. It blows me away. It's like we're able to do this. So anyway,
Chris, can I thank you and your Bern again for inviting me over? I do need to run because my installation is starting at 1600 hours UK time, and it's my wee clock in the corner saying 1603, and I've got a 10-minute jog round the corner.
All right, then we'll let you go. Thank you so much, Gordon. Hope to see you again.
At the door, knocking to get in. But it's good to see you all again, and I look forward to being in your company again in the not too distant.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Gordon.
Cheers, Ben. Bye-bye.
And then in 2 weeks, on the 30th, we are going to have Matt Parker from North Carolina, who could be our guest speaker. Matt spoke in person last year. He came up and visited us and was our guest speaker in person. He comes in at least once a year. I'm still waiting on his topic. I don't think he gave me. Let me just double check to see if he gave me his title of his talk. Oh, is that? Yes. Freemasonry and the Allegory of Plato's Cave. That is what Matt Parker will be speaking on. I do have that. I just hadn't updated my little spreadsheet. So thank you all for coming. If you're watching us, please like and subscribe. And I will see you, Michael, at the annual, if not before.
Right. And I don't know if just a question. Are you going to the Williamsburg meeting today?
Oh, that's today?
Yeah.
Probably not. That started at 11, didn't it?
No. Williamsburg has we're at 3 p.m. Williamsburg today is a meeting between the Grand Master of Virginia and the Grand Master of Massachusetts.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know. Probably not.
Okay.
I appreciate
Well, then
it.
I'll tell you about it next time I see you.
Absolutely. Okay.
What did you say, the allegory of what cave?
Allegory of Plato's Cave.
Plato's cave.
Plato was the one who said basically we all live in a cave and we're looking at shadows cast on the wall and we think that's reality. And that actual reality, we have to turn away from the pictures we're looking at on the wall, and we need to climb out into the sunlight and see the real world. The whole idea is basically in his time, it was the equivalent of saying we're living in the Matrix.
Okay.
Is how I see it. It's all an illusion. We're looking at the walls. So, brilliant. And tied into Freemasonry, I think that's gonna be awesome. Matt Parker is always an excellent speaker. I am fortunate to have so many of you guys who are really good speakers. You all make me look good. So,
Chris, I want to say one thing. I really enjoyed the program today because, as Americans, we probably don't know much about Field Marshal Haig. You know,
Correct.
he's not.
I don't even know his name
Really
is
fascinating
Earl.
to get that perspective on masonry and politics. I think that would have been my only other thing. Is just it's very interesting how how the royalty in some European countries, but particularly in England
Mhm.
and the higher ranks of military, have a tradition of masonry. Because people sometimes say, "Oh, all presidents are Masons, aren't they?" And I have to explain that to people.
Right.
Well, you get into the weeds on that. You say, "Well, Madison probably was, and Jefferson probably wasn't, but we
Right.
can tell you Washington was," that type of thing. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting to see, and it's after we understand, then likewise when you was talking about the fast thing with the conflicts between the members there, because we forget that someone like Patrick Henry did not get along with Edmund Randolph at all, but they're
Right.
they're part of the the revolution, but they have very different views on I want to take it this way, and Henry had an ego that wouldn't stop. He thought he should be have Washington's job, and so what's your qualifications? Well, I can do it.
Right. There you go. That's all you need. It's funny because, and that's what I really like doing these things. And I want to get back to having more panel discussions because I think those are great. Where I have the brothers from England, Scotland, Brazil, Philippines. I want to have some more of those because we as Virginia Mason and as Michigan, Wisconsin, where are you at, Kurt? Wisconsin, see? It's all the same up there. I mean, Wisconsin, you're out. If we sat down and picked out the differences, Wisconsin and Virginia are probably very similar if we went down the line of how we do things. So I say in general, Virginia Masonry reflects American Grand Lodge Masonry, I think, generally. But then you interview these guys from other countries, and it's very commonplace to them. So it's ordinary. It's like, well, of course, you only elect the master. And we say, well, of course, you elect junior deacon on up because that's just what we know. And it's been great opening our perspective at how, like, we elect a Grand Master every year. I take it you all elect a new Grand Master every year in Wisconsin, right? In England, the actual Grand Master is the senior male member of the British family who is a Mason. And the king can't be one. He can't be, I don't know if he can be a Mason, but he can't be the Grand Master, I think.
That's it. Yeah.
He can be, but he won't be the Grand Master. Prince Philip was a Mason, but Charles was not. And the current Duke of Kent has been the Grand Master since I first learned about this back in the 80s when we had some fella visited like a Pizza Hut I was working at here in Virginia Beach, and he attended our meeting. He was in town for something, and he saw my Masonic ring, and we got to talking, and I found out from him that the Duke of Kent was their Grand Master. So, and he's Grand Master basically for life, but then they have a, Gordon will be able to tell me what it was. They have a title for, they actually have a working Grand Master, and I forget what he's called. Provisional? Is it provisional Grand Master?
That's what I think they call it.
As opposed to, not provisional, but provincial. They have provincial Grand Lodges in other countries, and they have a provincial Grand Master who's basically a district deputy, but higher, who's in charge of like Australia, before it broke away. So a provisional Grand Master that is elected just like we would have a Grand Master, and those rotate through. So yeah, so it's always interesting. So quite a few members of the royal family join Masonry, but they join a whole slew of other things too, right? Other bodies. So they may not be active in Masonry at all.
Elizabeth's father was a Mason, and if
George V, right?
George V.
George
and there
V
are
was
some of his Masonic symbols on some of his stamps,
right.
And if you saw the King's Speech, not only there's no specific reference, but the man that taught him to speak was also a brother Mason.
Oh yeah, and I did see that movie. That was actually a good movie. So George V was a Mason, but he wasn't Grand Master.
Right.
He wasn't allowed to be, but he was a Mason. I've tried. This is again, it's hard to get. What's funny is I ask questions to some of our Brits, and they aren't as it's not like cut and dry. Like it's this. It's like, well, I think it might be. They're not even sure themselves. But it's like we need one of us who knows like Virginia Masonry forward and backwards. I need to find one of those guys. But I'm curious, was there ever a king of England who was Grand Master? And I think at one time he was, but I think at some point they decided that no, the king can't actually take that role anymore. I don't know. That's something I always wanted to. This is in my list of papers to do is, all of the Grand Masters of England and their ties to, where they were in the royal hierarchy and stuff like that.
An interesting thing along those lines too, because I thought it was funny when he said, "Well, this distillery was there long before your country." Well, it was long before the United States was formed,
Right?
But it was certainly not long. It was long. It was after, of course, the colonists were here. It was just
Right.
When
was the first colony?
Well, the first permanent one was Virginia. Remember, 1607. They had North Carolina one that had failed, and of course, the Spanish were down in Florida, etc. There's a fascinating book if you get called Elizabethan. Gosh, I'll think of the name of it, but it's done out of Rhode Island, and it basically shows how the famous Newport Tower. It purports in that was done as a marker in the style of a Templar building to show that the Spanish couldn't take that part of North Carolina. It was showing that was claiming it. So
well, okay. I got to show how bad I am with history. Columbus was 1492. Plymouth Rock was 1620. Wasn't it?
1609, I'm thinking, but I'll look it up.
But Plymouth Rock, the rival of the Mayflower, was the most well-known settlement. Was that the first permanent settlement? But Jamestown was before that, wasn't it?
Yeah, Jamestown was the first permanent settlement in America.
And that was
the one in the North Carolina colony, which was in the 1590s, had failed.
That was Croatan or whatever.
Plymouth Rock is 1620.
That's why
1607, and the Roanoke colony was around the 1590s, I believe.
That's the one that disappeared. The lost settlement. Yeah. Or they wrote Croatan on a tree and they don't know what it meant.
And then, of course, the Vikings, and it's
we don't. But okay, so
permanency, yes.
Plymouth, but the arrival of the Mayflower was significant. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember what it was that made it significant, because it wasn't the first permanent settlement.
No, quite honestly, this is kind of an American political thing. Jamestown was always taught as the founding of America until after the Civil War, and as a punishment of the South, Plymouth Rock was promoted. So even though Jamestown preceded it by 13 years, but Jamestown, so it's kind of that that kind of politics that it was just claimed, well, we Northerners got it right, But I mean, the reason that I wanted to tie this in real quick was that when I was in Rhode Island a couple of years ago, I met a guy who wrote this book, and I apologize for forgetting the name of it right now, but it talks about the 100 years between Columbus and when permanent colonies were established in America, and what was going on with the English in that era. And you think about it, because that's 100 years between when Columbus said, "Hey guys, there's plenty of land over here."
Exactly.
And when the rest of Europe decided to start having colonies. So it's a fascinating book to read on that level. And I'll try to get the name on it sometime. But the man there says, he's done research on Masonry in New England, and says that one of the first lodges in America would have been in the 1680s in Newport, that was done by primarily Jewish merchants, seafaring merchants. So that predates, some of the, Virginia's oldest lodge is about this, is the Norfolk one. But I mean, there were lodges before that. And one of the brothers from Jamestown said, well, there was something that we know that was very similar to Masonry from the early days of Jamestown.
Interesting. Well, it's like I can't even tell you, and I mean, of course, I didn't grow up in Virginia. Obviously, the kids who grew up in Virginia, they have a Virginia State history class in in school. I mean, I don't
Twice.
remember Washington State history. I don't know that we had it. I mean, I grew up in Seattle, so we had U.S. history, but not a specific class for state history. But I think, to be fair, Virginia has a little bit more actual history that you could fill out a semester with, as opposed to Washington State, where it's like, well, you know, Seattle was a big deal for about, 50 years before they got around to making a state around it. So I get it. But it's like Jamestown, I can't tell you what boats were, everybody knows the Mayflower. So everybody knows about the boat that came and made the settlement and all that. But Jamestown is like, there was Jamestown. That's all I know about it. Really?
Well, I know two of them, Godspeed and Susan Constant, and I forget the
There you
name of
go.
the other one. But,
Okay, see. But I mean, I grew up and I only heard, but everybody knows who the Mayflower are. So.
It's interesting. Some states do have their own state history. Now,
Yeah.
my wife grew up in Maryland, and I was surprised that they didn't have a Maryland state history.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah.
Go figure. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was fun. I'm glad you guys could come out. It's good to see you all again. And we're going to wrap this up. Again, if you're watching, because we're talking history, I think I'll include this at the end. I typically just run out to the end anyway. But it's the first 10 minutes I tend to cut out when I edit this for YouTube. So if you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And we'll see you all on the 30th of this month. Y'all take care. Bye.
You too. Thanks.